Welcome back to the Everton Byline. This is episode number 48. We are creeping towards a half century, Paddy. When we get there, I'm expecting you to, in the manner of a cricketer, get into the half century, raise your microphone to the camera, and a nice gesture to everybody.
Well, half century is like quite understated normally, isn't it? It's almost like there's a bigger goal here, and the bigger goal is the proper century, the 100 runs. So maybe I should go all out. Maybe we should be a little bit kind of low key for 50, and then when we eventually hit 100, that's when you raise the proverbial microphone to the camera. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll figure that out as we go. But yeah, we are on episode 48 at the moment, and loads to talk about before we get into it. As ever, just a reminder, we are sponsored by the Bridewell. If you want to check them out, the logo's in the top right-hand corner. They are obviously in partnership with Denby Castle as well, who are doing some great events over the coming weeks. I'm going to the one on the 11th of July, where Derek Manfield's speaking with my dad. So a little afternoon there. I think there's still tickets available for that. If you check them out on Twitter, it should be a great afternoon. That went to them on Pat and Evan earlier in the year as well, which is fantastic. So plenty going on at the Denby and the Bridewell over the next few weeks. If you watch us on YouTube as well, hit the little bell button underneath the video. That will subscribe to the Blue Room channel so you get notified whenever our videos goes up. Do hit like, do hit subscribe, of course, and do leave us a comment as well. And if you're listening to us on Spotify or on Apple, you can leave us a rating, leave us a review. All these things help. It only takes a second as we try and get the podcast in front of it in the ears as many people as we can over the course of the summer, which is going to be very busy, as we're going to talk about now. And of course, if you want to email us as well, which a lot of people have done over the past couple of weeks, it's evertonbyline@gmail.com if you want to get in touch. So, yeah, Paddy, busy day. I think last week, we sort of said maybe the quietest weekend in the footballing media window. And we took questions from people with that in mind, just to have a look at a few different things. But since then, it's certainly ramped up to the point where today, I don't know, it's just the heat getting to people and stuff as well. But people are starting to panic and have a bit of a flap about various things, certainly based on my timeline. But we're going to do our three topics as ever. I suppose the big bit of confirmed news we've got from Everton over the past 48 hours or so by the time this goes out is that Dominic Calvert-Lewin is leaving after 9 years of the football club. He put a statement out on Instagram on Sunday. Something I think we all kind of knew was coming, but I just wanted to ask you in regards to, like, as far as you're aware, how we got to this situation with Dom leaving, because I think obviously there's a lot of talk and everyone kind of knows that he could have left the football club last summer, but things broke down with Newcastle. Then obviously he got an offer from Everton. And at various points throughout the course of the season, it's kind of felt like, oh, he's definitely going. And then there was a few weeks ago when you and Alan did the show, actually, and it kind of looked, you did an interview with the BBC, didn't he? And it kind of looked like, well, what he's saying here, it kind of seems like he's going to stay. And obviously there's been talks with the football club. And then swung back the other way over the past few weeks where it's gradually felt like it's inevitable that he's going to be leaving the club. But like I said, as far as you're aware, in terms of the offers Everton put to him and whose decision it was, and where the ultimate sort of driving force behind him going was, where'd you put that down to as we sit here now and leaving the football club?
Well, I think it's quite interesting that the statement came from Calvert-Lewin himself. It was almost like he took ownership of the situation and got his narrative out there first. And I don't think, to be fair, I don't think anybody at Everton would necessarily want to push back too much on what he said in that speech, but and that letter to sort of open letter to supporters. I think there he was talking about how kind of he'd made the very tough decision to leave after 9 years. So there you kind of, from what he's saying there, get a sense that it's his decision. There's an offer on the table and it's his decision. I'd say it's a little bit more complicated than that, in the sense that, as the club put out, that they have been in discussion with him and his representatives for quite some time, actually. And an offer obviously was on the table. But the club can also through these negotiations, decide how far it wants to go, levels-wise, in terms of the amount of years on the table, the numbers for the salary, the annual salary as well, and weekly salary. And I don't think, from what I've been told, they ever got particularly close, the two parties there. It always felt like it was maybe a bit of a stretch to get this over the line. And I think that's why over the course of probably, let's say, the last month, there was a lot more movement towards, we think he's going. Like, a lot of that came through in reporting. I think probably the first thing I did on this, where I went a little bit stronger, was very early June when I did my summer transfer window preview, and I said within that piece that the club were looking for a new striker to partner Beto, and the one I'd named there was, or one of two I'd named there, Thierno Barry alongside Nick Voltemada. As it stands now, Barry looks much more likely than Voltemada to come into the club, certainly out of those two options. But I think the inference there within the piece was that everybody expected Calvert-Lewin to leave, and that meant a new striker had to be on the cards for Everton. So this is maybe a cop-out, Matt, but I don't think it's entirely as straightforward as Calvert-Lewin deciding he wants to go and wouldn't have listened to any offers Everton put to him. I know for a fact they did listen, and they did sit, and they did see if a deal could get done. And I don't think it's also as simple as Everton spurning him and saying, we don't want you at all. I think what we're seeing this summer quite a lot, and particularly with Everton, is this sense that they have a level that they will go to, and they won't go beyond that level. I think I've seen a little bit with Idrissa Gueye, certainly saw it with Decore earlier in the summer. And I think that this is just kind of another example of that, really. So probably the news we were all expecting. I don't know about you. I'm just glad we've got an outcome. I probably wasn't particularly fussed which way it went. I'm just glad we got an outcome.
Do you know what? I never really had that with it, because it just kind of always felt like, I'm trying to think, since he got injured, I think, against Brighton, like, to me, it's all like, apart from that little spell, that little week where he did that BBC interview, maybe for a couple of days, where I thought, oh, maybe he's going to stay. It just always felt like he was going to go, because it kind of felt like last summer when that Newcastle move fell through and the contract offer was put to him, I think, quite early in the season after the transfer window closed. Like, it kind of felt like if he was going to stay, like, that would have been the time to do it. And
well, he was offered earlier, wasn't he? He was offered, so he was actually offered before the end of the season before. And at that point, had no intention whatsoever of signing. And I think that at the time was more down to the fact that, certainly the way Everton were heading, it still seemed a bit uncertain. He was playing under a manager in Dyche that wasn't necessarily conducive to the way he wants to play his football. And then also you have this added element of, well, going into the final 12 months, let's test the water here. And it's almost a negotiating stance, isn't it? You don't accept the offer and you see what else is out there, and you see if somebody's going to come in for a cut price deal. So, I mean, I wrote in a piece that was published on Sunday, but written a couple of weeks ago, for Calvert-Lewin's eventual departure. I wrote that I kind of felt like this had been a saga that was kind of 12, probably 16 months in the making. And I mean, it would have been a lot easier if we'd had an outcome last summer. It would have been probably a lot better for Calvert-Lewin, because he'd have a club, and it'd be a lot better for Everton in terms of getting a fee for him or for extending him in terms of his contract. But now finally we do have that answer, and I think maybe there was maybe more of a desire on their side to at least have a conversation with Everton this time to see where it went. I think that's why we got a little bit of a PR drive with that BBC piece you mentioned, but certainly not enough desire from both parties to kind of meet in the middle and thrash this out. Ultimately, I think everyone's got a price, and I would actually probably applaud Everton for not going too high here.
Yeah, I agree. And like, there's going to be a theme maybe throughout the summer, and one deal we're going to talk about with Tete, potentially, where and Everton in the past might have tried to go back to him and go, well, we'll offer you even more again. And like that's not the way to do business, is it really? But like sort of come back to Calvert-Lewin, yeah, like it's just sort of felt on the cards for a while now for me. But like people who've listened to the Blue Room for a long time will remember, I don't know if you do, Paddy, like I used to stick up for him all the time. Like when he first came through and was like always like, even when he wasn't scoring goals or something, like, there's a player there. So like at that point, I always thought like I'd be gutted when he eventually left, but it just kind of feels natural now, doesn't it? Like it's kind of run its course. There's been a lot of lows. There's been obviously plenty of highs as well, but I think sometimes in football, 9 years is such a long time, isn't it? When you think about it, for any player or anyone to be involved in a football club now, like that's essentially the entirety of his peak years. What is he? How old is he now? 28, I think I'm right in saying.
Well, think about those 9 years at Everton as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
strange.
Yeah, it's very, very bizarre. And I mean, there's probably a couple of things I'd say about Dom, which, like, I think he deserves credit for the way in which he kind of changed his game over those years and was able to kind of remodel himself based on what the manager wanted from him. So if you go back to Silva, obviously he was this kind of like Roman battering ram target man who would be a great foil for all the players around him, but wouldn't necessarily chip him with goals because of that. Because his finishing wasn't ever good, obviously, but he was always moving around the pitch and doing the bits off the ball to help people like Richarlison and Sigurdsson and whoever else was in the team at the time. And then that completely flipped, didn't it, under Ancelotti, where he went from being the player who did everything but score goals to sort of being the player who's just in the box to score goals. And I don't think there's many players who could have done that. And I think at that point, when he obviously had a lot of great service to him from Digne and Richarlison and Sigurdsson and James Rodriguez for a little bit, like it felt like that version of Calvert-Lewin could have gone to a really top club and scored a half full of goals at that point because he was so sharp. He was physically looked incredible. Do you remember he came back after that summer after COVID and we played at Tottenham and we won 1-0? And he just looked he looked enormous, and he was so ripped and strong and powerful. And I think that maybe at the end of that season, at the time where he'd moved on there and you thought, he could have gone and done it elsewhere. But I think he deserves credit for that, for the way in which he sort of changed his game down the years. But I think also as well, like I was at Villa when we lost 4-0 at the start of the season before last. And he came off that day going, like, putting his head in for a challenge with the keeper. I think it was Martinez, and like had a broken cheekbone. And like good portions of the away end booed him that day. And like that was really quite horrible to see, really, because I think he's a player who like has been injured a lot. But I've never, I mean, you know better than me probably this, because you've probably spoken to him a few times and been around that environment a bit more. But he's never felt to me like someone, and like people used to say this about Daniel Sturridge, I don't really know if it's fair about him, where they'd look at him and he'd be injured all the time. They go, it's all in his head. It's all in his head. He's scared about getting hurt and scared about breaking down. And I never really got that vibe from Calvert-Lewin. Like it felt like he was always willing to put himself about for the cause. It felt like at times managers rushed him back a little bit as well, because the situation was quite desperate for them. So I think it'd be harsh to look at him and go, oh, he didn't really fancy it. Listen, he had bad games. He had games every now and then where he didn't look that interested. I'm sure every player who's worn an Everton shirt for 9 years would do. But I wouldn't necessarily say someone who was unwilling to kind of, put it all on the line for Everton. And I think ultimately, we talk about Richarlison and how he's, damaged goods now effectively, because he did so much for Everton when he was clearly not fully fit. You can maybe say the same about Dom as well, but it doesn't quite get talked about as much.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't, and I think you're right. Certainly the season where Everton stayed up under Frank Lampard and Calvert-Lewin ended up scoring the winning goal against Crystal Palace, he'd definitely been to some incredibly low points individually, and then came back to score that winning goal. So, like, I think he deserves an awful lot of credit for that. Like you say, kind of changing his game and repurposing his game for different managers. He's obviously, I would argue that goal against Crystal Palace is the most important in Everton's modern history. Because I think if Everton go down that season with all that's going on, the financial issues, PSR, stadium, sort of underway and everything else. Russia-Ukraine sanctions, which obviously are very important, like that geopolitical situation for Moshiri, all of that put together, as well as things like the lack of players who had relegation release clauses. I kind of shudder to think where Everton would be right now, and maybe the same with Bournemouth as well the year after. Maybe the same if TFG hadn't come in. But certainly, if it's not the most important goal, it's one of them in Everton's modern history. There have been other goals like that. I mean, I loved his performance in the April 2024 Goodison derby against Liverpool, where he just bullies Konate into submission to the point where Konate gets taken off. Does the same to Virgil van Dijk and Trent Alexander-Arnold at the back post for his goal. But what I think we got with Calvert-Lewin, I think you've got a very distinct before injury and after injury with him. Just getting back on the pitch after all his injury problems, I think was an achievement for him, given how tough it had been. Getting to the point where he was playing regularly again for Everton, as he did in previous seasons, I think, again, a massive accomplishment for him. And I think in these one-off games or these short bursts, you would see inklings of the Calvert-Lewin of old. I just don't think we ever saw them enough. It almost felt like he was kind of straining to get back to where he was before, but just couldn't quite. It was always just out of reach for him. And like, I think I was a bit apathetic when this came through. I mean, first of all, it was Sunday and I was off, so I was like, "Why have you done this on a Sunday afternoon, Dom? Could it not have been a different time?" But also to do with what we were saying earlier about how long this has dragged on for. The final element here is just that, like, even 2-3 years ago, if somebody had like asked me to imagine an Everton side without him and how an Everton squad without him would cope, I'd have been quite worried at what was going to come and how Everton would fare. But now it almost felt like we had that dry run in the second half of the season. He obviously gets injured in January in that Brighton game. Pretty quickly, you get the sense that he's done. And I think it just changes the course of everything that happens afterwards. You've got Beto there, who I think initially isn't particularly fancied at the club. He's a sort of second choice striker who's not doing a load. And certainly there would have been some desire from Italy to get him either on a loan or in a permanent option. But that just opens up that window, and then we get the whole rest of the season with Beto playing as the number 9. And look, we all know what Beto is by now. We all know that he's got flaws in his game and whatever else. But he did like a perfectly decent job as a Premier League number 9. Scored goals, led the line. Sometimes, as Calvert-Lewin always has done, bullied defenders. Like I think to the Newcastle game, final day of the season, he throws Botman and Byrne and Shaw to the turf on numerous occasions. So I think, like, if somebody says to me, like, it's going to be Beto plus one other, and let's say for argument's sake the one other's Thierno Barry, I'm not necessarily sure Everton are losing much. They might be losing like the Premier League savvy, the know-how, the kind of knowledge of the club and all that kind of stuff for whatever that's worth. But maybe Everton come out of this slightly stronger if they do the business right in the transfer market. And I suppose that's why when it came through, I just kind of shrugged. And that's nothing against Calvert-Lewin, because, like I say, he's always been really good to interview. I think he's clearly a nice guy when you speak to him. And his story is really compelling. I've probably been with him every step of the way up to now on that journey. So it kind of, to me, just seems like a logical time for everyone to go their own ways. And now the next big question for me, Matt, and probably something worth discussing briefly, is where he ends up, because I think that's fascinating as well. Like I find, like I struggle to see a logical outcome for him, certainly in the Premier League.
Like I was saying this the other day, I look at him and I look at, maybe not so much now because he's had a great Euros, but saying I look at Harvey Elliott and I'd say, I think they could join 15 of the 20 Premier League clubs and I wouldn't be surprised. If you get what I mean, if someone said to me Calvert-Lewin's going to go to, trying to think of an example, team at the top. If someone said Arsenal are going to sign Calvert-Lewin as a backup striker, like, yeah, maybe. Or if said Newcastle, where did Newcastle finish third in the last season, or were they fourth? If someone said Newcastle are going to sign him, he's going to be backup striker to Isak, like that would make sense. But then if someone said Leeds signed him as well, that would also make sense. And like everyone in between would make sense as well. Like it's weird, isn't it? Because I think it'll be interesting to see what he wants now in that sense. Because I think in that interview he did with High Performance, didn't he? He said he wants to play Champions League football.
Yeah.
And we've sort of spoken about this in regards to Branthwaite and Champions League football with Tottenham. It's like, do you want to play in the Champions League and just tick that off and say you've done it? Or do you want to play for a team that can challenge and go into the last stages and maybe even win the thing? And I don't think Calvert-Lewin's getting that necessarily as a starter, but if he went to Newcastle, he could potentially be part of a squad that could do well in it. Although I don't think they necessarily want him. But then he's not going to play every week. So I think that's going to be interesting to see what was that? Sorry.
It's tough. It's really tough to envisage.
If you could name a team now, not basically any kind of inside info, anywhere in Europe where you think he's going to end up, where would you say?
I think he will end up not far from the Everton bracket of clubs in the Premier League if he stays in the Premier League. And that, again, that's just speculation on my part at the moment rather than any kind of informed knowledge. But and like you say, he could go to an Arsenal or a Newcastle or wherever else, but he would have to accept his status as very much a backup option. And I think everything would be reflected there. It would be like maybe you take a certain salary, you're a backup, and you just have to kind of live with that because you're at a big club, Champions League playing club. Then you've got that list of teams below Everton, like a Leeds, and yeah, I could see him leading the line for Leeds. I think he's probably got more chance of starting for them up front
on that first day of the season against us.
Imagine. But like, would his ambition be beyond them? I think it probably would, certainly at this moment in time, early in the window. So then there's that bracket of clubs, and I'm talking about the ones who are kind of historically big, but have kind of been underperforming. If you get it right quickly, it can turn around. So like historically, probably it would have been kind of Newcastle, Villa teams like that. At the moment, I'd say it's like West Ham and clubs of that ilk. Obviously, West Ham were in that mini league with Everton. So places like that.
Even United.
Maybe United if they need a backup striker. But like, let's say he was to end up at West Ham. Is it worth it to like leave Everton to go there? Maybe he wants a change of scenery and wants to be in London, for example, so then it becomes a lifestyle thing. But in like a purely sporting terms, footballing terms, it feels at best like a sideways move. If not, maybe something slightly worse. So that's where I struggle. Like, maybe you look at him. If I was his representatives, I'd be targeting somewhere like Forest because they have some form of European football. Chris Wood can't go on forever, and Taiwo Owanye's had some bad injuries, so there's probably room from there. There's also probably room for backup strikers at top clubs, but we're going to see what he wants now. We're going to see what really, really matters to him. Is it the lifestyle? Is it the money? Is it I want to be at a big club and have the status that comes with being at a big club? Or is it going to be, I want to go somewhere now, be the number 9, and then for the next 12 months, I'm going to be in the England conversation again because that's what I really want. And like, it's going to be really fascinating to see what decision he makes there because I'm sure there'll be interest. Like, for me, like the coolest thing would be if he turned up at like Fiorentina or Atlanta, or clubs of that ilk, not necessarily those, but like clubs on the continent, and completely did something new. But that's tough when he's got a young kid.
Yeah, I could just see him like so many. Like, I could see him at all those clubs you mentioned, like Fulham. Marco Silva obviously worked with him before as well. I think like Moon has been linked with an exit. I could definitely see him in Italy, like you said. I can imagine him in that purple Fiorentina kit. And do you know what? It also wouldn't surprise me if he signed for one of Celtic or Rangers either. Like I could easily see him going there and playing for one of those two teams. And
they can't pay though, so he'd have to take a pretty drastic pay cut from where he was at Everton.
Yeah, but yeah, it's gonna be weird anyway. I'm seeing him potentially because it's obviously been so long with Everton. But listen, he's very much the past now. Let's get on. We've done a lot on Dom there, so we'll rattle through some of this section because I thought this was going to be the big section, but maybe not because it's just titled contracts / transfers on our WhatsApp group. Let's rattle through all the sort of stuff. So let's time set this. We're recording this at 8:15 on Monday night. So that's right. The 30th of June. So in case something happens now and people think, what are they on about? That's where we're at. So let's rattle through them, Paddy. Jarrad Branthwaite. Exploratory talks seem to have turned into real talks. What stage is he at now in the organising to go out for a pint with his mates and letting his other half know? Is he like on his way, or is he waiting for the train, or is
I think he's about to open the door to go
from the house or out to the pub?
I suppose either. He's close. He's close to being ready to go. That's it. So I think this has moved forward. It's progressed over the last week, and I think there's now confidence that while it's not done, Everton think it probably will get done. So, yeah, positive.
Yeah, definitely. We spoke a lot about that last week, so we won't go into it too much. But in regards to other players, obviously Seamus Coleman's done a 1-year extension, which we kind of all knew about as well. Idrissa Gueye is the other sort of really good news. Seemingly, that seems to be heading towards a conclusion. By the time this goes out, if it's not been confirmed yet, he will technically be a free agent, which is a little bit scary, but seems like some kind of agreement. I mean, I don't know if you can shed any light on what that would be in regards to the deal is close to being reached with him as well, because there's obviously a bit of haggling over the length of contract.
Yeah, I think the deal, as far as I'm aware, there was a deal on the table from Everton, and it was, do they want those terms, or are they going to go out into the market and try and find something that trumps the Everton offer? And I think when I talk about trumps, I mean more in the sense that it's maybe longer term than what Everton were willing to offer. So it would surprise me. It would surprise me right now at 8:15 on a Monday if it ends up being a 2-year deal. My guess is, and again, a guess, probably 1 + 1. But they're hopeful. Again, they've moved in the right direction with it, but it's not over the line. So again, it's not done until it's done. We have to add the caveat.
Would the 1 + 1 be? Do you reckon it would sort of be based on if he makes X number of appearances, it gets activated, or just be Everton's decision on whether they want to activate it or not?
Well, there's loads of different ways this can happen. With the Decore one, I think it was shortly after the January transfer window, Everton basically had a decision to make as to whether they wanted to do it. So I would say in that situation, with regards to the actual decision, they had probably 100% power there when it came to deciding whether they wanted to take up the extra year or not. I imagine that quite a lot of the haggling in recent weeks and days has been to do with how achievable the extra year is. Look, if they do 2 years, fair play, but I don't think they've necessarily wanted to, otherwise it would have been done long before now. And I also think that it was going to be very hard for Gueye to go out and get 2 years anywhere else on the open market because of his age. I think a lot of clubs would have that reticence when it comes to his age and the contract on the table, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, Gueye is not yet resolved at the time of recording, but it looks to be positive news. Branthwaite again looks to be positive news. Coleman is done. So that kind of only really of the contracted lads, out of contracted lads, it's only Michael Keane.
Yeah,
we still haven't spoken about.
That seems to be, again, like, seems like been assumed that he was going to be going, and then today obviously we had reports come out suggesting that talks are being held, and obviously not anywhere near being done in regards to him staying yet, but it seems to be erring towards that.
Yeah, I don't think well, certainly not in our reporting. We've never mentioned that we think he's likely to leave or anything else. Like for my money, the talks have been ongoing for quite a while. I mean, the club said when they delivered that update at the end of last month, they said that they remained in dialogue, in conversation with Calvert-Lewin's people and Michael Keane's people. So I don't think it's necessary.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I think in the same bracket, like when that statement came out, there was also reports saying that Calvert-Lewin was definitely going. So I think maybe people put two and two together and said, like, well, if Dom's in the same bracket as Keane, then Keane's going to be going as well, because it's not kind of been solved yet, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, we've always presented it as the discussions were ongoing, because I don't think there was necessarily a very clearly defined, like, these have stopped for a week or two. I don't think there was a very clearly defined pause. And I don't think we also went we didn't go strong at all on that he's definitely likely to leave line, because our information was that it wasn't decided one way or another. So we weren't going to guess. So those talks are ongoing. I know that other clubs have been in and around it for him very, very recently. There's kind of an idea from within the club that it's not the worst idea in the world to have a fourth choice centre-back and just have that one ticked off and then focus elsewhere. But let's see how the next few days go. I mean, I'm probably slightly more convinced that he'll sign a new deal now than I was a week ago.
Yeah, and again, he always seems to trigger strong responses. Keane, like, probably stronger than in some sense, which is a bit weird. But I'm with you. Like, I get that he's not like an elite defender. I understand that if he comes into the team, we'll probably be a little bit worse off because of it, because he's just like, that's essentially what it is. But in a somewhere they've got so much to do. Like, would Everton be able to get a better player than Keane right now on the open markets for them to come in and be like, and you make the pitch to them, you're going to be our fourth centre back. You're not going to play much this season. You're going to play the odd cup game. If two of our centre backs are injured or suspended, then you'll come in there. And like, it just feels like if it's there to do and they can get him on potentially reduced terms for another year, you use that money and time and your resources on positions in the squad which really, really need it. Like, I just don't see the problem with it really. Although obviously Keane is a player, there are certain misgivings around it. And like, O'Brien can continue to develop, Branthwaite can continue to develop because they're going to be ahead of him in the pecking order. And I think if this had been sort of floated in the media this week and then we hadn't heard about the Branthwaite contract development, I would have been thinking, are they tying him down with a view to the worried that Branthwaite's going to potentially be sold and they just want another body as centre back. But like, it feels like they're coming at this from a position of strength, Everton. They're not going to Michael Keane with a begging bowl and say, we're desperate for you to stay. It's probably like a case of, well, you can stay if you want, but these are our terms and this is how much you're going to play.
Yeah, and I think with a very clearly defined fourth choice centre back role at that too. I mean, like the
second choice centre forward at the moment.
Second choice. I mean, you could say that about quite a lot of positions. I mean, second choice left back, because there's only one senior left back at the club. It could be first choice right winger, because anyone else. Just picture him, Rob, when we go to Chicago, Rob Vera with like Michael Keane lined up on the right wing, and his response to that, and just
we'll have to try and get Keane to come down to the show. We're going to potentially be doing. Imagine that them two finally meeting in the flesh. Rob would proper like melt into himself. Yeah, he'd get all. Yeah, Rob would get like all shy, I think, as well, and like be like, "Hiya, Michael, nice to meet you." But anyway, away from those incomings, which is much more exciting, Paddy.
Yeah,
Thierno Barry. I thought I was tracking his flight last night from Central Europe to Liverpool. Apparently, it's not him. Although I was looking at the internal the interior designs on the plane seats and everything, and looking at whether it matches to what I found on Flight Scanner. But he did put a picture up on his Instagram of him on a plane. But that's another one that feels like it's moving forward. Kenny Tete, I think as you reported last week, looks like he's sort of edging towards Fulham now. I think for Tierno more now. I put this tweet out before, and I think people might have thought I was having a dig at the report, and I wasn't. I just really loved the phrasing that it was Everton's offer was nearly accepted, which I just thought was hilarious. How do you nearly accept something? It's fantastic.
I think, to be fair to Fabrizio Romano, English is not his first language, so I imagine probably saying something along the lines of Everton were close to getting a deal done. I mean, I suppose that's open to interpretation. They certainly had held talks with Tete, and the offer was on the table. And I think at one point before Fulham got involved again, it looked like it could happen.
Do you think on that? Sorry to interrupt you. I've done that quite a bit today. Sorry. The main thing a lot of people have said to me in response to that is that we've been played here. His agents had a blinder. Do you think this is a case of Everton getting, for want of a better phrase, had off by an agent, or is it just one of those where this kind of thing can ultimately happen when the player is about to become a free agent?
I think both of those things can be true at the same time. You can have a situation where Everton have legitimate interest in a player, are trying to sign him, and at one point think they're going to get it done, but then the situation changes. And at the same time, it wouldn't be the first occasion where an agent has used other interest from another club as leverage to get their client a better deal. I mean, I'm not going to comment on this particular situation, and I don't really want to disrespect anybody, but what I would say is that if Tete's agent set out with the idea of getting a new big money offer from Fulham, then it looks like he's played a blinder, regardless of how he's done it. I mean, I'd be a little bit disappointed in a number of ways, but one, I just felt like you were signing a potential starting right back on a free, and of course, there's no such thing as a free anymore. You have to pay signing on fees, you have to pay agent fees, you probably have to pay more in terms of salary to get him in. But I would have still considered it a pretty shrewd bit of business. I'm not going to go weeping into my cornflakes or Rice Krispies if it's announced tomorrow morning, Matt, that he's staying at Fulham, but I think it would have been smart enough. But yeah, it wouldn't be the first time other clubs have been used as leverage, and it certainly won't be the last either.
Yeah, I think ultimately these things happen, don't they? Where, especially when he's still effectively a Fulham player, and they use the example of Calvert-Lewin there in regards to going to play in for clubs of a similar stature, maybe uprooting his family and stuff like that. Like Tete's essentially in that position, isn't he? As well, obviously Fulham are not as big a club as Everton, but they finished above them in the Premier League in recent years. He's probably really settled in London. He knows the manager, knows the team. He's dead popular. Anyone who listens to the now ill-fated Kenny Tete special we did on the Blue Room will know from what Sammy James said that they all absolutely love him down there as well. So if he's getting a good offer off them, he can stay at Fulham. It's not a sideways move to Everton, like I said, because Everton are a bigger club, and we've obviously got big ambitions with the new stadium and stuff like that. But you kind of get why he'd be happy to stay put. So I think it's one. I don't think it's anything to panic about. Yeah, and as you said earlier on, in some respects, I'm kind of encouraged Everton haven't gone back and said, "Well, you've gazumped us, or you've matched our offer. Let's go again. We'll raise you this much, and we'll give you this length of deal," which feels like something maybe rash that the old Everton would have done. But that's notwithstanding, obviously they do need players, and just on Thierno, Barry, Paddy, feels like it's, like I said, moving along nicely, that one. And I think there's a few. I know you reported last week that Everton looking to negotiate below the £34 million release clause, or €40 million, probably should say, release clause in his contract. There were comments from Marcelino, who's the Villarreal manager, and the Villarreal sporting director over the weekend, where they both sort of hinted that they'd be willing to do business below that fee as well. doesn't feel like there's a bid gone in or anything yet, but like it feels like they're just going to kind of meet in the middle. Like, tell me if I'm wrong here. It feels like one of those where Everton will probably end up paying something close to that release clause, but it will be a structured deal over the course of a few years, as opposed to going to, given that weird thing they do in the league where they give the player the money and they've got to go to the league offices and operate it themselves.
Yeah, again, conjuring those images of Steve Walsh travelling over to Milan with a briefcase and the big wad of cash going to Thierno Barry to take to La Liga headquarters. I'd actually like that. That would actually be good kind of compelling content for behind the scenes, wouldn't it?
If anyone from Everton's content team's listening to that, like, just get a camera to follow him around. Like, what does that sit? Because there's a lot of mystique around that. Like, get him a briefcase, get him into the Liga offices, and follow him through there back to Everton. Yeah, I'd love that.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously been a player of interest now for most of the summer, and one of the top targets, as has obviously been reported a few times now. I mean, I don't sense yet any decisive movement on this. I think the clubs are speaking, they're looking to do a deal. Again, if I'm guessing, I probably, like you, think that something... if Villarreal are going to negotiate below the release clause, I don't think it's going to be a huge amount below. I think we'll be talking about a couple of million here or there, and then maybe you want payment terms in a slightly favourable way if you're Everton. Same Villarreal side want more money up front, but I don't think it necessarily has to be a case of Everton go and have loads of bids rejected publicly. Like, if all parties want to do the deal, then there's no need for the big song and dance, is there? Really, that's just all PR and optics. You just sit around a table, and I think they've been sat around the table now for a decent period of time and thrash out what this looks like. And I think there's a sense that Thierno Barry would be very happy to come to the Premier League and would be very happy to come to Everton. So that, again, seems to be moving in the right direction. I mean, like, where I'm a bit hesitant here, Matt, is like we've got 3 or 4 situations during this podcast where we're talking about like things getting closer to reaching a conclusion. But they need to happen, and some of them need to happen quite soon, particularly on the contract side. I think there probably will be a bit of edginess that sets in amongst elements of the fan base, if it hasn't already, at kind of what others are doing in the market and how few players Everton have got heading into pre-season. I think where that will really dawn on supporters is when they're back at the start of July. I think the end of this week-ish. And you see just how few senior players are left, but also how many of those senior players are injured. Yeah. So like Tarkowski's had an injury and Jarrad Branthwaite had an injury and so on. Some have been away on international duty. I think a bit of restlessness will set in there. And yes, of course, Everton have had a lot to do and they've made progress on contracts and they've already signed Carlos Alcaraz. But I reckon like a signing or two just completely it kind of eases things, doesn't it? It puts tensions to bed for a little bit, I would say.
Yeah, I'm not there. Yeah, I don't understand why people might be starting to get a bit edgy, but like I'm just trying to take a bit of a step back. And I think if someone said to me like a month ago that we'd be not even in July yet, and Jarrad Branthwaite was very close to signing a new contract or close to signing a new contract, Everton were close to signing someone of Thierno Barry's pedigree up front, and they'd already got Alcaraz through the door. Like, they feel like significant things, and like, I think every summer people say we need to get 5-6 players in to start pre-season training. It's just never like that for a club like Everton anymore. Certainly with our turnover of staff and our financial restrictions we've had in recent years. So I'm trying to be a bit more patient with it all. I think signing a really exciting young striker, getting Alcaraz in and tying down our best young prospect feel like big moves. But obviously 2 of them haven't actually happened yet. Because the other ones put into that is Idrissa Gueye signing a new contract as well. Like 3 of them haven't actually happened yet, but they feel like they're close, if not moving towards a conclusion, which they will. And obviously with Everton, you never quite know. But the direction of travel is positive from my point of view. I'm trying to keep that in mind when I see people maybe rightly losing their minds and getting a bit edgy on social media. So we'll see. We were going to talk about PSR today, Paddy, but we've kind of ran out of time. I'm sure there'll be stages in the season where we can do that. So Bear messaged me on Twitter with a really good message about this. So, but we haven't really got time today because we've spent too much time gabbing about transfers and exploratory talks and all that sort of stuff. So we'll do our usual squad numbers section to finish off. Just a reminder, we're going to take this to 50 and then mix it up a little bit. So if you've got any ideas about what you think we should do at this end of the show a bit, thanks for the many people who've sent it in already. But it's evertonbyline@gmail.com if you want to put your idea forward. Number 48, Paddy, we've got Kyle John twice. He wore it in 22-23 and 20-21. Morgan Feeney, 17-18. And Courtney Duffus, 14-15. Do you have anything to say about any of them? Morgan Feeney felt like he was a really good prospect for a bit and just never quite worked out for him, did it?
Did Morgan Feeney make his debut in that really ill-fated Europa League game against Atlanta at Goodison?
I remember going to Lyon away and he came on that night. I think I'm right in saying. Yeah, this is where we need Liam from.
He did. So he did. I think
John Joe Kenny got injured, I think.
Because I picture him in that, that purple strip that they had. And I think he also played against Limassol. That's I've got pictures of him coming on as a substitute and thinking against Atlanta at Goodison and thinking this is a terrible one for certainly making your home debut because he was a boyhood Everton fan.
Yeah.
Morgan Feeney. That big plunk Cornelius, who'd been at Cardiff City for a while, scored a couple of goals that night. It's just like, how have Everton conceded 2 to this lad? It shows you how bad that team was at that moment in time.
Sandro Ramirez's only goal for us that night as well.
Sandro Ramirez's only goal. Who were the other ones? Kyle John, last I saw, he was at Port Vale, doing pretty well at right back for them. I'm sure he'll have a pretty solid lower leagues career. I'd be surprised if he went much beyond kind of League One, really, but League Two, League One, that kind of seems to be his level. I'm sure he'll do pretty well there. And then the other one, Feeney himself has just moved to Carlisle, I think. Had some terrible injuries, Morgan Feeney. Really, really good kind of out-and-out defender in the academy. Maybe one of those players who, if they'd been born 10, 15 years earlier, would have had a bit more in the way of plaudits and a few more opportunities. But yeah, good defender who's had a load of injuries. Good to see him doing well now. Courtney Duffus, I don't have a load to say about him, to be honest, Matt. I know he had a load of loans at Everton, and was he at Barrow at one point?
I've got no idea.
Get on his transfer market page and have a look.
Find out for you now. But just on Feeney, it was earlier this year at Shrewsbury that he was taken to hospital because he got stretchered off against Stockport in a neck brace for a really bad tackle. Yeah, so it wasn't a bad tackle, it was just a challenge where he sort of fell awkwardly. But I think there was a lot of concern about it, like in the immediate aftermath. But he's obviously all right now. But Courtney Duffus, he did have a spell at Barrow, 23-24. So he's leaving Everton. He's played for a lot of different teams: Oldham, Waterford, Yeovil, Bromley, Morecambe, Stockport, Morecambe again, Barrow, Hartlepool. So a bit of a tour of the north there for
going through the lower leagues. Because he had a brother, Tyrone, who was a midfielder, and a few years below that came to Everton as well as part of that deal. But I think Courtney Duffus played for Republic of Ireland. Youth level. Kind of this big battering ram striker, but probably didn't have enough to his game to make it at the highest level. But yeah, every time we get to this, it's always a bit of a kind of a mental test to see what I can remember about these kind of quite obscure academy players. Now, I mean, we had was it Mason Springthorpe last week and Courtney Duffus and Kyle John.
Tom Cannon last week was the sole.
Tom Cannon's all right. Yeah.
We've we're not far off with it now.
We're limping to 50, aren't we?
The irony is, like, the next couple of weeks looking at it now aren't great, but then we get to 51. There's actually 3 quite interesting ones there. So
maybe we stop at 51 then on a high.
Yeah. Well, people keep their ideas coming in. We've got some great ones so far. So thank you for those. It's evertonbyline@gmail.com if you want to put your idea forward. We won't wrap it up there this week. Who knows? By the time we get off this call, Everton might have signed someone might have left. Who knows? So if you listen to this, or you won't be listening to this on Tuesday or watching this on Tuesday, please do bear that in mind. But thanks very much to Paddy. We are sponsored by the Bridewell as ever. If you're watching us on YouTube, do leave us a comment. Let's beat the Blue Monday lads for comments. Always great to see some debate in the below the video on YouTube. Do hit like, do subscribe. If you listen to us on Spotify, you can leave us a rating and a review. And the same goes on Apple as well. And you can subscribe on both of those platforms too. We'll be back next week for number 49. Who knows what will have gone on but in this increasingly wild world of Everton. Up the Toffees. Speak to you again soon.